Followers believe that decoding its ancient texts will reveal the answers to the greatest mysteries of life. In the 21st century, celebrities including Madonna and Britney Spears have taken up a modern interpretation of the practice. Yet the spread of Kabbalah has resulted in controversy. Strict adherents warn that observance of this mystical rite conceals hidden perils. Throughout history, its followers have written in code in order to protect Kabbalah's secrets.
How many levels of understanding are there? Maybe infinite. So the more you have to decode the past, to decode the text, the more mystical it is, the harder it is to decode.
In Babylon, at the beginning of the 6th century BC, a young Israelite called Ezekiel had a vision. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and fire flashing forth continually. And in the midst of the fire there was a throne. Sitting on the throne was a figure that looked like a man. Ezekiel thought he had peered into heaven and seen God seated on his throne. The vision captivated a group of Jewish mystics. They hoped that by studying the image, they would one day see God for themselves and become one with the divine.
Jews who are seeking a mystical experience will try to reimagine what Ezekiel experienced. So it becomes the model for Jewish mystical ascent, really until the emergence of Kabbalah.
In the 2nd century, the Roman Empire controlled the land that is now Israel. Jews who practiced their faith openly were either executed or exiled. It was during this dark time that many Jews turned to mysticism to help them understand God's purpose for them. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was one of them.
Rabbi Shimon was a great advocate of the people of Israel and taught that Israel has a special intimacy with God. And he fled from the Romans who sought to execute him because of anti-Roman statements he had made.
According to the ancient texts, Bar Yochai hid from the Romans for 13 years in this cave in Pekaim, in Israel. Here, in seclusion, Bar Yochai meditated on God and the universe using the Torah, the body of Hebrew scripture, as his guide. His piety made him one of the salient figures in Kabbalah's history. In emulation of Bar Yochai, other small groups of Jewish mystics began to experiment with Hermetic rites to achieve a deeper understanding of God.
Since God wasn't coming to them, they were going to where God was. So they wanted some kind of experience of the divine. They used certain meditative techniques that worked them up into an autosuggestive hypnotic trance.
Their activities were kept a closely guarded secret. The mystics warned that their rituals were too hazardous for ordinary people to attempt. Their stories describe novices going mad or even dying because they were unprepared for the potent spiritual forces they had unleashed.
If you're not pure enough, if you're not modest enough, then God might not accept you, then God might not let you go through that journey.
Through meditation, the mystics believed they had achieved a vision of God similar to the one experienced by Ezekiel. In this vision, the entrance to heaven is blocked by a series of gates. The acolytes must pass through them in order to reach heaven. The entrance is also guarded by avenging angels who keep the unworthy from entering paradise. Before the mystics can advance, they have to learn the convoluted names of all the angels. Each name must then be repeated an exact number of times.
The mystics would wear amulets that would shield them from the power of the angels. And if they went through all the gates and they got into the throne room, then they would have this vision. They would learn the secrets.
The devotees claimed those secrets helped them understand God's wisdom and purpose for mankind. At roughly the same time, anonymous mystics recorded an extraordinary concept in a hugely influential text. It is called the Book of Creation, or the Sefer Yetzirah. It describes how God made the world by using the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
God spoke and said, "Let there be light." So obviously God's speech was the creating agent. Well, what language did God speak? God spoke Hebrew, of course. So the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet were the alphabet of creation.
What Sefer Yetzirah does is to try to describe how God created the world in more detail than we find in Genesis. It builds on the notion that God created the world through language, but now it's not words so much as individual letters. And this is probably meant rather literally. God took the 3 letters Aleph, Bet, Nun, which spelled the word Even, stone. By combining those letters, a stone was created. And similarly with every object in the universe, God created by combining the letters with the numbers.
Rabbis believed the teachings of the Sefer Yetzirah were too powerful for ordinary folk to experience, and they were kept hidden from view. The Book of Revelations remained concealed for hundreds of years. In the 11th century, the Crusades engendered a new wave of anti-Semitic persecution as Christian armies attempted to reclaim the Holy Land from its Muslim overlords. Fleeing from torture and persecution, Jews scattered across Europe and the Middle East, taking their secret traditions into new territories. By the 13th century, the mystical teachings had spread to Jewish communities in the lands that are now Germany, France, and Spain. The term KABALAH, meaning receiving in Hebrew, became widely used to describe their religious practices.
We're really talking about a small group of Jewish teachers, rabbis, spiritual people who were gathering the earlier traditions, developing techniques of meditation, and reimagining God in some very startling ways.
One of the most significant events in the history of the movement occurred about 1280, when a Spanish rabbi claimed to have discovered yet another mysterious text. This soon became the single most important book in Kabbalah. It is called the Zohar, meaning radiance or splendor in Hebrew.
It's really the masterpiece of Kabbalah. The ideas of the Zohar are very radical and very startling.
Written predominantly in Aramaic, its pages are crammed with arcane symbolism and highly erotic language. By arousal below, there is similarly arousal above. Male and female unite, desire prevails, worlds are blessed, and above and below are in joy. To this day, the identity of the author of the Zohar remains unknown. Many Kabbalists believe that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai received divine inspiration to write the Zohar while living in his cave during the 2nd century. Others suspect that the manuscript was written 1,000 years later, possibly by a Spanish Kabbalist or perhaps by a group of radical rabbis.
It's in a way written by someone in Aramaic who didn't really know Aramaic that well. And you also strangely find words in medieval Portuguese and Spanish in the Zohar. So the question scholars have been wrestling with for a couple of hundred years now is, who wrote it and how did it come to be?
But the greatest enigma of the Zohar lies within